The mules are in the corral. Welcome to Mule Talk, and I'm Cindy K. Roberts, your host.
We have back our author, TV personality, and world-renowned mule trainer, Meredith Hodges of the Lucky 3 Ranch. Welcome back. And Meredith is going to share with us about core strength training and some funny incidents that took place with her mules and why she decided there is a better approach. Let's get started, Meredith.
All righty, Cindy. Yeah, we're going to be talking about something that I've been talking about quite a bit, and that's postural core strength training, and particularly done in the beginning on the weed line in what I call the hourglass pattern, in my postural aid, the elbow pull. But I think it would be good to hear about the history of how that kind of evolved, because you know, our mules, they have their own mind, and they do what they want to do pretty much all the time. And my big mule is 16 two hands, Lucky 3 Sundowner, and he won the reining in 1984 out at Bishop Mule Days, but I had a Steve Schwarzenberger train him, and he was the one that showed him out there. But then I thought, well, he was out of control with me, pretty much. He would do what Steve wanted him to do, but he really didn't cooperate with me all that much. He'd go, "Oh, you're not balanced up here, so I think I'll run away now." And so I thought, well, maybe taking dressage lessons might help him. So in 1986, I began taking lessons with Melinda Weatherford, who was a United States Dressage Federation instructor trainer. And that seemed like a really sound idea, and it was. Before I got to that point, I was kind of afraid of these mules because they really didn't act like horses, and you couldn't manhandle them the way that you could a horse.
Right.
So when I was trying to first mount them, for instance, people told me, they said, well, just get them tired, and then get on them. So lunge them for a long time, and then you can get on, and they'll be calmed down because they'll be too tired to take off. Well, mules aren't like that, I found out.
Yeah.
And I lunged my mules, and they weren't tired, and I got on anyway, but then they thought that's what they were supposed to do. So I would get on, and then they would run. And every new lesson, they would lunge longer because they didn't get tired. They got stronger.
Sure.
And they would, when I got on, they'd run further. Then getting on was just a horrendous thing, too, because they didn't want to stand still. So I figured that maybe I could just tie up a front leg with a slip knot on it and get myself up into the saddle, then release it so that they might not take off. Yeah, right.
Okay.
They did. They did. That didn't hamper them, but they just thought, oh, this is the game we're playing. This is what we do. And in the meantime, people are telling me, well, you gotta do all this stuff in the round pen, and they were giving me all the horse training ideas to try, but of course they weren't working on the mule very well. And I had to get this running under control. And so I thought, well, I've seen draw reins, so I guess I'll go ahead and try those. I was riding in a twisted wire snaffle bit because that's what the reiners use to train.
Right.
That seemed to not do much good, but it really concerned me because it was tearing up the corners of his mouth, and getting them all bloodied up, and I didn't like that very much. So I did switch the bit to just a mild snaffle bit, a ring snaffle, and then I went to draw reins with that, and that seemed to kind of sort of work, but he still had the upper hand. There's just no two ways about it. And he was aggravated because the way that ring slips on that mouthpiece, it was pinching the corners of his mouth.
Oh.
So it aggravated where that wire snaffle had made scars and opened them up again. So I thought, well, I don't know. So I'm going to go with this dressage trainer and see what we can get done. We went to her place to take the lessons, and she was having me go ahead and just ride around the perimeter of the arena just to see where we were at. And, of course, he would bolt. And she'd say, I said walk. I said, I am walking. I'm trying to. He won't stop. And she goes, you see this button on my vest? And I said, yeah. She goes, what does it say? I said, no whining. And she says, well, I mean it. I don't want to hear anything. If he's doing these things, it's your fault. And I said, well, you want to get up here and try and see what you can do with him? You're telling me to do this, but I can't get him to do it. And I didn't have the draw reins on at that point. And so she goes, well, okay, let me try this. So she gets up there, and he ran off with her. And I said, you see what I'm dealing with? She goes, yeah, you get back up there. Let's get something done here, And I said, well, I can I use my draw reins? No, we don't use draw reins in dressage. I said, well, it seems to me if I can get him to slow down a little bit and pay attention to me, then he might think that is what he's supposed to do. If I can't slow him down, he's going to do what mules always do. They put their head in the air, they hollow their neck and their back, and they run.
Sure.
That's what they like to do, And she goes, oh, well, okay, I guess we can put up with those. And then she saw how that kind of worked with him. And then the next thing she saw was how my body was crooked while I was riding him. And my left leg was higher than my right leg. And she says, well, you're riding him off balance, and that's what the problem is. And I said, well, I'm trying to put my left leg down, but every time I do, he takes off. And so she goes, well, work on it, and here's something you can do. She says, well, go ahead, and when you push down in your stirrup on the left side, take your left arm and take it straight up in the air and stretch that whole side. Well, as soon as I put my left arm in the air, he took off again.
Oh.
And ran off with me. And I says, well, that doesn't work very well. She goes, oh, don't worry. He'll get used to it. I said, yeah, okay, And my draw reins, I did notice when I was using those that his distance on the runaway was getting less and less and less. It just took a whole year to stop him from running off like that,
In other words, it took you a year to make him comfortable. Is that what you mean?
No, because we still weren't comfortable.
Oh.
It took a year for him to realize that I wasn't just doing weird things to play games.
Okay, got
that
it.
There was a purpose to it.
All right.
That when I put my arm up in the air and my heel down on the left side, it centered my body over his back, so I wasn't interfering as much with the way that he was going.
Okay.
And that was when I came to this illumination that I wasn't as good a rider as I thought I was.
Oh.
And that I was interfering with his, what I call, postural balance.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, when people are in good posture, their body moves more correctly, and it doesn't interfere with the internal organs operating and functioning correctly. And it is, in a sense, it's more comfortable, but it takes a long time to get that kind of control over your body. And rather than just looking at making the animal do things for me and thinking I was riding correctly, I realized how incorrect it was how I was riding. I even put a mirror in my indoor arena so I could watch myself. And I had my ex-husband go ahead and take video so I could watch myself and see all these little things, these small nuances that were making such a huge difference in his behavior. Now, in medical school, I learned all about the digestive system. I learned all about the respiratory system, all about the muscle system, all about, all of these different systems that operate in your body, how they all affect each other. The one system that they told us in medical school was the endocrine system, and that's the one with the hormones and everything in it. And those are the ones that kind of affect, well, not kind of, they affect your mood and your behaviors. And they told us as students, this is not a system that we feel comfortable researching because it's so delicate. It involves chemicals and chemistry in your brain and your body. And if any of it gets off a little bit, it can have devastating results. But what we have found is that if we keep all these other systems, the senses, for instance, taste, smell, sight, hearing, and all of those in line, if we can feed them the right way so that their digestive tract is comfortable, if they get the right kind of physical exercise so the respiratory system can be optimized, and if we can give them the exercises that don't just put muscle over the top, but actually support their bones so that their bones can move in the right way, then this opens up the whole system, and the endocrine system will be affected in a positive way, and their mood will be good, and their behaviors will be good as a result of taking care of all these other systems in their body. And that's absolutely true of the human being. So whenever I do what I do with the animals, I always practice in the living room myself and get down on all fours and see what this is going to do. How do I get them to stretch, for instance, because stretching can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And a lot of people think that just stretching the neck and putting their nose on the vertical to the ground is how you get stretching.
Right.
But it doesn't do anything for their back. And that's where you're sitting. And for instance, when I was doing all this stuff too, the big thing in the Western pleasure classes was to have their noses on the ground. And they called that stretching. While they were tiptoeing with their front feet and tiptoeing with the back feet, and they weren't reaching under the center of gravity where the rider was sitting. So the rider, as they're tiptoeing, is bouncing on their spine. And so what happens over time with that is that they get this condition called kissing spine, where the spinous processes that stick up from the vertebrae across their back are being pushed together and calcifying and getting stuck. Now, right now, their solution for that problem is to go in and surgically saw the calcium out from between the vertebrae, those spinous processes. And my vet and I talked about this extensively, and I said, that sounds awfully drastic to me.
Yeah.
But I think there are other ways to do healthier things. And it hit me that what we needed to do was get them to stretch all the way from the pole to the tail somehow, and get them to step under their bodies and create more suspension. And the draw reins were not doing this. They would only take care of the head and the neck, and they were in my hands. And my hands were not even in steady as much as I thought they were. So I felt like, well, I'm interfering with the animal. Lindy, my instructor, said, well, we can work on getting you balanced over his body. And instead of riding on the rail of the arena, what we're going to do is we're going to do an hourglass pattern, what I call the hourglass pattern. She says you put cones in the four corners of the arena and two cones in the middle of the arena that are closer together. And if you drew it in the ground, the pattern that you're going to do, you're going to go across the short side past two of the cones, come to the middle, change direction, go through those cones that are close together and go back to the cone on the same side and go around the two cones at the other end and then come back again to the middle cone. So if you drew it on the ground, it would be an hourglass that you were drawing in the sand. And so I thought, okay, so I was riding that, and it really did help, because when you're riding along a rail or anything like that, there's an optical illusion that takes place, and they actually lean away from the rail, which automatically puts your balance off to the inside.
Right.
And that doesn't help your riding either. It doesn't help the animal. It doesn't help the riding. And people say, oh, well, I work my animal on both sides. I go first around the arena one way, and then I go the other way. But, see, that doesn't really help. That just means the internal pendulum that's swinging for balance inside the animal at the center of gravity is going left, 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 all the way around. Then you change direction, and it's going right, right, right. So it really doesn't help the balance at all, because there's no center. But when you go through this hourglass pattern, it swings. The internal pendulum will swing as you're going to the left. It swings to the left as you go around that second cone. Then you start making that turn towards the middle, and the pendulum starts to swing the other way, to the right, to the right, to the right, as you're coming through that turn in the middle. And then it does the same thing. You go through that turn, and it's only short distances, so it goes right, right, left, 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 and across the next short side, comes around, left, left, and then right, right, right. And I thought, this is really working. We were actually getting better. And I thought, but the thing that disturbs me is that he's got a rider on him that can't really ride balanced yet. And it seemed to me that this kind of thing needed to start earlier on the lead rope, and I needed something to prevent him from getting out of good posture and getting him to go ahead and stretch all the way from head to tail. Well, I had a big discussion with Richard Shrake about that, and he was there in 2007 by this time, and we were talking about how to get them to sustain balance without having the restraint in the rider's hands. And he showed me, he said, well, look, I'm going to put this lariat on this horse, and you see what I'm talking about. So he looped it over the pole and put the lariat through the bit rings and then through the front legs and up and over the back. And he goes, now see what happens when I pull this tighter up over the back. The horse gives it the pole, arcs his back and his neck, and then when he moves, he steps well under and hits the center of gravity below the torso. And I told Richard, I said, if we're lunging like this, then he's going to be able to have enough power coming from the hindquarters to reach underneath that center of gravity under his torso and launch himself into suspension, which will send him up on the forehand and not down on his nose like all these quarter horses were doing. And with that suspension, at first he's going to have to speed up to sustain it, but after he gets stronger, he'll be able to hold the suspension longer, and so he will be able to slow the pace down when he doesn't feel like he's constantly falling forward, when he can actually hold himself up for a few split seconds longer. So then you don't get that tiptoe, tiptoe, tiptoe thing. You get those hindquarters coming off and lifting them into the air and slowing the gait down for the Western Pleasure jog. And it's a jog. And the thing is about that, when it's the same principle as when they ask for the extended trot. I looked at the definitions in the United States Equestrian Federation manual under dressage to see what the different gaits are and what they had to say about them. And they said that an extended trot should maintain the same rhythm and cadence as the working trot, but it covers more distance.
Yeah.
And this is the same principle whether you're doing a working trot or the pleasure jog. You see, you're just going backwards the other way. It should be the same rhythm. He should hold the suspension longer, but instead of covering more strides, or a longer stride, he's keeping the same stride and just slowing it down by the amount of time that he spends in suspension. But this requires getting them to have the kind of exercises that they can do to build up what I call core postural strength. And they have to do it in good posture, and you have to know what good equine posture is. And one of the things that I like to have people try so that they can kind of visualize this in their head is just try to tiptoe along and see how long you can do that. When you do that, you get tired and your head bobs forward and you get out of good posture. But what happens when you kind of prance along and you keep your shoulders back and you keep your head up and you look where you're going? And the most important thing, you point your toes in the right direction. Now, one of the things that I've seen in a lot of animals is bad gaits, hard gaits. People look at them and go, oh, well, this guy's paddling, or this guy's cowhocked or sickle-hocked or whatever, and they blame it on the conformation, but they don't really try to do anything about it.
Right.
So I decided to develop this elbow pull rigging, and Richard went one way with it, and I went the other way, and I actually made the elbow pull not from the lariat rope, because that's very stiff. It doesn't slide very easily. The other thing that I did was I went to an egg butt snaffle bit on my bridle, because I knew there was going to be pressure on that bit. And I went to a drop nose bend so that Sonny would stop flipping that tongue over the bit. I wanted him to take that bit in his mouth and learn how to hold it so that we could lessen the resistance that we had between us, especially when I put this elbow pull thing on him, because in the beginning, it's tight because they will pull against it. And what I did was I got a 3/8-inch nylon twisted rope, and the twisted rope is important. You don't want to get those that are 4-braided or anything like that, because you want to be able to adjust this thing. And you need to do it exactly to the T right for the animal's balance, and they're all different. Not only do you have different sizes of animals, but you have different breeds of animals that carry their head in different places. Like, for instance, a quarter horse is going to carry his head a lot lower than a saddlebred. But they both need to be able to get their poll above their withers, because if they can't do that, then they can't elevate the shoulders and step well under with the hindquarters. You've got to give them the latitude to be able to do that. So when you adjust your elbow pull, you set it on the off side, on the right side. You go ahead and set it and tie it off, then go through the front legs, through the bit, and you do it through the bit from inside to outside, over the pole, and then from outside to inside, then back through the front legs. But then when you adjust it, where you're going to tie it off on the near side, you want to first rock your animal's nose and make him flex at the pole easily and relaxed. And once he's relaxed, then you hold that elbow pull in your right hand and you cup his muzzle in your left hand and you push his head up. And you push it up as far as it can go before you see he starts to stick his nose out and hollow his neck. And that's where you want the tension, right before that happens. And that's where you tie it off. Now, I spoke about the elbow pull having to be 3/8 of an inch nylon twisted rope. That's because you want to keep it light It needs to be able to slide over the bridle and down to the rings really easily as he moves, because when they move, as the forelegs come back, it pulls on that thing. So it needs to be able to slide back and forth across the crown. Now, it helps, too, if you put fleece over the crown and run that rope through the fleece so that it doesn't fall off the crown of the bridle and start rubbing on their neck, because it will chafe them if you do. The same thing happens if you don't have that snap on the side. On the sides, where the girth is, you want to take it back as far as you can. Now, you're going to go up to a D-ring up by the gullet of the saddle. But when the rope of the elbow pull comes down, just take it and loop it toward the back side of the cinch, because your latigo is going to stick out a little bit. So that means that you can take that rope and take it away from the forearm or the elbows and have it come down on the right side of your latigo, and your elbow is on the left side, so it will keep it from rubbing underneath, in their armpits, so to speak. And because otherwise it will create a callus from the rubbing, because it's going to be a little tight as long as they're not able to keep their balance by themselves.
Right.
It optimizes their pursuit of that balance, and it helps them to find it, but it takes a while to do that. So you want to keep that rope away from any areas where it might rub, and do whatever you can to help that. And I found that works really well. When you're making this elbow pull, and you do need to make it, that's why I don't sell it. One size does not fit all. And so I do have a video in Equus Revisited that will tell you how to make the elbow pull and how to measure for it. And you want exactly what I said, the 3/8 inch rope, twisted rope, and you want small snaps on the ends. And so you go to the hardware store and you get these tiny snaps that are small enough to go through any D-rings on any saddle. The only saddle that they won't go through is, say, your English saddle. And what I do on the English saddles is kind of tricky, but since I'm only lunging in that thing, I will if I'm going to ride in it, then I have to make it fit exactly and snap up on the rings up at the gullet of the saddle. But when I'm just lunging, I can tie up the stirrups, and then I can use the stirrups as something to take the rope through. It doesn't matter if you have small snaps. In this instance, they do kind of need to be small, because if they're too large, they won't double back and snap into the rope. And to get that exact measurement of tension, you'll get this thing secured on the off side, then take it around and come back on the near side, put it through the stirrup, and see where the tension needs to be. And then you just snap back into that rope. You just untwist it and make a little hole for your small snap to go through, so that you can maintain exactly the right kind of tension for that elbow pull for that animal. And it is that meticulous, because if it's off, if it's too loose, it's not going to do any good for their posture. If it's too tight, it's going to make them sore.
Yeah.
So it's really important to get that adjusted properly. And then what I do is I decided that if all this is going to work, I got to take the pressure off to get no resistance from my animals, so that they can get in their good posture as quickly as possible. And that means leading them through this same hourglass pattern that Lindy taught me, to ride through, only this is without me on their back, and allowing them the time to adjust their strides, to adjust their posture, to respond to me. And so I go ahead and put them in either a surcingle or a lightweight saddle, and the drop noseband bridle with the egg butt snaffle bit and the elbow pull. And I will put a halter on over that bridle so that I don't interfere with that postural rigging. I don't want to put a lead rope at the snaffle bit, for instance, because that's going to pull out of adjustment. The other thing that I noticed, too, is the way we lead these guys. Because when we lead our animals, what happens, and most people don't even think about it, I sure didn't in the beginning, but after I started thinking about all these little details, I realized that when I was taking my lead rope into my right hand and moving off with them, just saying, come on, let's go, we were out of sync, totally. They were walking one way, I was walking another way, and even though I had 3 feet of slack on the rope, every step that I took pulled their head to the left, to the left, to the left. And I thought, I have to release their self-carriage. I can't be interfering with that. I need to lead them because otherwise they'll just leave. They won't be with me. So I would put their head at my shoulder, and then instead of holding the lead rope in the right hand, I held the lead rope in my left hand and let it drape loose across my stomach and up to the halter. And you think, oh, well, if you're doing that, they're just going to run circles around you or whatever, which they will. They will. Oh, yeah. Or when you have that fanny pack of oats strapped around your waist, then they're always diving in to get it. And there has to be a balance to that. So I hold the lead rope in the left hand, but I point in the direction of travel with the right hand that's right next to their face. Their head is at my shoulder. It's right next to their face. And then I want to pay attention to how I'm walking. I can't be wobbling. If I wobble at all, it's going to make them wobble. Because that arm is going to move away from their face and into their face, and away from their face and into their face. And remember, we talked about how a fence will make them lean away from it. Well, your arm will do that too. And so it's really important that if you're a person who walks duck-footed, you got to make dang sure that your toes are pointed forward. And you can test yourself with this. A lot of people don't realize how duck-footed they can be. But you look around in a crowd and you'll find a lot of people walk duck-footed.
Oh, yeah.
And if you just stand still and stand duck-footed, feel what it does in your butt. It tightens it up. It brings the pelvis together. And it's really hard to walk. When you point your toes forward, it opens up your pelvis and your hip joints and allows you to travel forward and much more easily. And the other thing that happens is now all the joints in your leg, your hip, your knee, your ankle, and everything can move freely and bend freely. And when you're talking about good posture, you need that because that's how arthritis starts, is from being out of good posture in those joints all the way down the leg, from the stifle on an animal all the way down to the hoof. And it's the same thing for you. If you're not, you're going to get arthritis if you're not walking properly. The animal that is cowhocked can actually learn to travel straighter and avoid problems with arthritis and getting locked up in the stifle. Hip problems, tipped pelvises, and all of that can be taken care of, and especially that kissing spine thing that we were talking about earlier. Because when they're walking straight and bending at every joint and stepping well under the body, they're using their body properly, and it frees up all those joints to work properly, which means that the cartilage in those joints is being worn evenly and will not start to calcify in the joints. What this does is people go, oh, well, okay, he's got a little arthritis here. I think I'll just use this medication or that medication. They end up injecting joints. They told me in medical school, you got to be really careful if you're going to insert a needle into a joint, because that is penetrating the fluid sac that lubricates the joint.
Oh, yeah.
And however small that pinprick is, you created a hole. If you want to look at it with common sense, that's what you did. And that fluid will leak. And then they go, oh, well, you can put the fluid back in with Cosquin. Well, you might put enough, you might put too much. But whatever way you look at it, it's out of balance. And it's out of balance through the whole body. You do one thing in one place, and it affects their whole body.
Yeah.
And you don't even realize how much. So I've learned, number one, you got to feed them right to keep those intestines going the way they should. I don't think alfalfa is a good thing for them at all because it creates so much gas in the system, which creates colic, and then founder, and twist, and all these other things. So you got to make sure you're feeding them right. And a lot of these grains are not good. Crimped oats has never been a problem for any equine, and they love them.
That is the correct answer.
But they still need to get the nutrition. I firmly believe that the old ManoPro Show Glow vitamins is just like the old one-a-day vitamins. It gives you what you need. And if you're lacking in something, you can always do lab tests and find out what you're lacking in. But a lot of times what we end up doing is we supplement too much with some of the things that we're lacking. I know my doctor told me at one point that I needed iron, and he gave me a supplement that actually made me sick because it was too high a dose.
Oh.
Didn't need that. Just needed to eat something with iron in it, and not go to the medications.
Right.
And this is another thing that I firmly believe there are solutions to these problems with this postural core strength training that you're doing in this hourglass pattern on a lead line. You have so many things that are happening when you're doing that, because there are places, for instance, in that pattern where you're going to stop between cones. You're going to square up. You're going to have them stand still. You're going to stand still, and you're going to wait for him to finish chewing. And all of this just decreases anxiety. It disperses the anxiety that starts to build. You position yourself to the inside of the arc when you're leading on the circle. So he knows you're always going to be there. And everything becomes predictable. In that way, the pattern is actually a good thing. It's a positive thing because he doesn't feel like there's an invasion every 5 minutes. Oh, gee, we're going to change this. We're going to change that. And you learn to walk straight lines and gradual arcs. And then the next thing that you will do is introduce him to the drive lines, and he will graduate again for a second time to the hourglass pattern. And instead of what I did not mention is that you need to be in sync with his front legs. So when you tell him to walk on, then you look down to see what foot he's leading with, and you match it step for step for step through the whole pattern. And any time you're leading him, this is what you do. So he knows that you're always in sync with him. You're never going to do anything abrupt. You're not going to make any abrupt changes in direction or anything. If you do a turn, it's going to be gradual, and you're going to stay in sync with his front legs. And when you graduate to ground driving in this pattern, now we're going to get in sync with his hind legs. And you're going to follow those. And your hands on the lines will learn to follow him forward. These two things are preparing him for when you get on, that you are riding correctly. And not only that, you are doing all this in good posture yourself. So you are learning good posture. You are learning the movement. You are moving with him. So you are in sync, two different stages through this hourglass pattern before you even get on. And the elbow pull that you got on him, you don't have to mess with it like you do with draw reins and other things that are hard and fast, like martingales and stuff on him to hold the posture. Because even with martingales and all that, it requires your hands being on the lines and doing something to get them in good posture. But the elbow pull, when it's working, it gets tight when they're out of good posture, but it's completely self-correcting for the equine. And when they get into good posture, everything loosens up. When it's tight, it puts pressure on the pole, it puts pressure on the bit rings, pressure behind the elbow, and pressure over their back. And I might mention at this time, when you adjust this elbow pull, if you're using it on a horse, you cannot hard tie it.
Right.
Horses, when they feel that resistance, and they are not allowed to flip their head wherever they want it, they'll throw themselves over backwards and do all kinds of crazy things.
Right.
So instead of hard tying it at the saddle, at the surf angle, or the D-rings, you just take the two ends of that elbow pull across the top of the saddle or the surf angle and cross it over a few times like you're going to tie a knot, and then pull it tight. And then you'll have your snaps, but you don't want them dangling because the weight of those will pull that thing loose. So you loosely snap them into a D-ring on there with a lot of slack in it, so that if the horse starts pulling on it, it will loosen and turn their head loose, but the snaps won't fall, and it won't come untied, and it won't all of a sudden fall off the saddle and hit him in the leg.
Oops.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that about the horses, because when horses are restrained in some way, they can get psycho.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally psycho. And they go into all these things. If you get into my manual and particularly on the DVD, I show you what happens with a horse in the elbow pull.
Okay.
And I show you how to loop this over. And the first time I put it on this great big warm blood horse, he was, about 16 hands or better, and he just went into a complete bucking fit. I was standing in the middle of the round pen, and he came right towards me. He didn't care where I was.
Right.
He was just bucking all over the place, and I just kept going, Indy, I'm over here. Trot. And that's the other thing. Don't just, stand there in awe of them and not connect with them, or not try to connect with them.
Yeah.
You got to talk to them like you got to talk to a kid when they're throwing a tantrum. You just got to go, no, it's really okay. Mm-hmm. This is all I'm asking of you. You don't have to throw a tantrum now. Right. Let's just trot nicely around the round pen. You've done that before without this. Now let's try it with it, and keep your head about it, and you do the same thing with the mules. And they will get tight, and they will test it. But eventually what they're going to do is they're going to stretch their spine. They're going to get into good posture. They're going to step underneath, and they're going to find that when they get into that good posture, everything goes loose. And they are in charge of it. Let's go back to the leading thing again. When you're leading them around the hourglass pattern, you want that halter over their bridle so that you're leading with your lead rope snapped to the normal place where it's snapped, and you're going to be leading the same way all the time with the lead rope in the left hand, keeping slack in the lead rope, having their head at your shoulder, pointing in the direction of travel. You look where you're going. You walk with your toes pointed forward. You say their name before you start, and you walk in sync with them. And that becomes a habit. It's a predictable habit. And these animals really like it when everything is really predictable for them, because then they don't expect any abrupt changes. They don't get tense in their body. They just try to figure out what you want, and they pay closer attention to you. And this is the beauty of the hourglass pattern and the elbow pull rigging, is it actually sets them up to do the right thing. And it sets you up to do the right thing, because whether you realize it or not, you're getting postural core strength training at the same time that your animal is getting it. And you're coming together, and you're building your relationship, and it's getting more and more intimate. The bonding is a whole lot deeper, and it transfers to every stage of training that you do. But you start with the leading training, and the animal learns their own self-carriage. I gotta say that with 32 animals in training, it got kind of daunting in the beginning when I was trying to ride them all in order to get them worked, quote unquote. I realized that with this core strength training, it's a lot different than building bulk muscle, because bulk muscle makes them stronger. That's true. But it doesn't take care of their awkwardness. It doesn't make for ideal conformation for them when they're not ideally conformed. You make the best out of the conformation that they do have when you do these kind of exercises, so they will eventually reach their own ideal posture in good balance. And what was bad movement is now changed and been altered by behavior modification. That's rewarding good behaviors all the way along and changing those behaviors, reshaping them, so that now where they were out of good movement and awkward, you have changed them to a much smooth, more fluid, strong, balanced way of moving that is posturally correct, which after 2 years of this training becomes their normal way of moving, because through repetition and consistency, they've just learned to move a different way. And because it's comfortable for them now, because they've gone through all the awkward stages, you've corrected it all the way along the way over 2 years, now it's their normal way of moving in good posture. And I can tell you myself, just my posture's better. It's not to say I'm in good posture all the time, and neither are they. And when you turn them out, people ask me, well, do you have to work them all the time to do this? The first time that question came up, I had to think for a second, because no, I don't. Oddly enough, after this 2 years of 3 to 6 months leading training through the flat ground hourglass pattern, 3 to 6 months duplicating the hourglass pattern and then adding obstacles for core strength and coordination on top of that core strength, and then taking them to the round pen with that good balance and teaching them to lunge for 3 to 6 months in good balance again in the elbow pull. That does not come off in 2 years. In fact, I go an extra year under saddle even while I'm out riding on the trail and everything, because that's a whole different ball of wax, and they'll want to fall out of the good posture. Yeah. So in order for that not to happen, you just ride with it. I mean, people ride with martingales and all these other things too.
True.
It's in the animal's, it's in his control. He has control over it. And with all these straps hanging that we have, my God, with the straps they put on, breaching has a lot of straps that can get caught on things too.
Sure.
But when you're in good posture, the chances of you actually falling out of balance and getting tangled up on something is greatly decreased. Don't worry about it. You're going to be doing this, and then you've got another 3 to 6 months after lunging and ground driving, and the animal's posture is being altered. Like I said, it becomes his normal way of moving, so that when you turn him out, you watch him move without you out in the turnout pen. And you will see that now he's tracking up. His back feet are moving up into the footprints of the front feet. He's traveling straight. Granted, if he gets to playing, he's going to be bouncing, but look at the way he bounces. It's not awkward. He doesn't lose his balance when he does it. I mean, I had an Arabian mule that went out there and was playing and did a full-blown capriole, launched herself right into the air, kicked out with both hind feet, tucked her front feet while she was doing it, and arched her back.
That is really cool.
Wow.
It was amazing, and I went, oh, mules can do that too, not just lipizoners. And granted, I never got to that high of level in dressage, but I did get to 4th level dressage, where we were headed for that.
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
You know, we were doing canter pirouettes, we were doing passage, we were doing piaffe, and I was dancing to Strauss waltzes. That's another thing that they really enjoy that really helps their cadence and their rhythm, as if you play music during their lessons.
Oh, yeah.
When you're riding. They like that. Find music that's in line with their own natural rhythm and play it while you're exercising. They love it. When you do all of this, the end result of all of this, if you have 32 mules, is that you actually have to train less after the 2 years. Because by virtue of you opening that gate and letting them out into turnout, now this postural core strength training is so solid that they go out and practice it all by themselves, because now it's their natural way of moving.
That is really cool.
When they slouch occasionally, some of them will get a little lazy, but you can tell when they're getting a little lazy by looking at your herd. When you look at them out in turnout and you see somebody out there, now the whole herd stops to rest and they're all standing square. They're all standing 4 square with equal weight over all 4 feet, because that's the most comfortable way to be. Mm-hmm. It's in good posture. So if you look out there at rest time and somebody's dropped a hip and cocked a foot, sure, or is unevenly standing there, that's the one that needs to be brought back in and reminded, only by leading through the hourglass pattern again and reminding them of their good posture. And once they're reminded, they'll go out and do it again immediately, and they'll do their own practicing. So you don't have to be working on them all the time. And the beauty of this hourglass pattern in the elbow pull, the leading end of it, that's the only one that really addresses all of the elements that are closest to the bone. Now, people talk about core strength being muscle. It's not just muscle. It's tendons, it's ligaments, it's soft tissue, connective tissue. It's the way that the cartilage is between the bones. All of those elements that hold those bones together are involved when you're talking about core strength. So they all have to be developed symmetrically around those bones. And if there's any deviation and it gets asymmetrical, it's going to cause problems. And that's why it can only be done at the walk, on the lead line, with no rider, in the hourglass pattern that has the ability to swing that internal pendulum and address every single element in the animal's body. And the other thing that it will do is it will also get the brain synapses going to the muscles that tell the muscles what to do. It will get them into a rhythm as well. And this is what you're after. This is the main thing of all of this leading training and why you really, really need to spend a lot of time on it. Because the other thing is you can leave these guys all winter. You can stop riding in September and come back in April, and the core strength is weakened a little bit, but it's still there.
Yeah.
Bulk muscle deteriorates completely over the winter. Completely.
Yeah.
But this doesn't. And with a gradual little tune-up, and the nice thing about the tune-ups is, here's the deal. People go, oh, I can't spend that much time on this. I rescued rock and roll and discovered in that rescue, I thought I was going to have to do this hourglass pattern for at least every other day with both of them. And I had other animals in training. I had 7 mules that hadn't even gotten on yet, and they were 12 years old. And I thought, well, I don't know if I have time for this, so I'll at least try to get them in for once a week. I did them once a week, and my arena is 60 by 120 where I do this workout. And I only had to lead them around the hourglass pattern once one direction, cross the diagonal, once around the other direction, once a week, and it built up their core strength and got their balance, and you wouldn't believe the change I got in both those boys in 6 months. It was amazing. And they did just what I described to you. They changed their way of moving. We had been taking x-rays because Rock had kissing spine. Roll had, and Rock and Roll both had ring bone, side bones, calcium deposits, and arthritis in the joints. We had taken these x-rays right from the beginning, and oddly enough, Rock ended up having a shattered hip, but he did get completely sound at the walk. And they said up at the college when we took the x-rays up there and we did the necropsy after he died, they said they couldn't believe he was walking sound because his entire hip joint was shattered.
Yeah. But
the thing was, Roll, on the other hand, he had more ring bone and side bones than Rock did in 3 feet, but the college said Rock had to have been hit by something as big as a dump truck to do what it did to his hip.
Right.
And we figured Roll must have been on the other side, so he didn't get hit by whatever hit him. He didn't get hit as hard, but he still was off balance enough, so he had calcium all through his body, arthritis and everything. But the odd thing about it is that we did the x-rays after a year on Rock, and we did Roll too, and the things they came in with had not changed. They had not gotten any worse. So we couldn't cure the arthritis. We couldn't cure the calcium deposits, but we sure as heck didn't make it any worse. And there was improvement in their posture, improvement in their way of going. And I actually got Roll to graduate to the round pen, to the ground driving, and to the riding. And I rode Roll after a year of the groundwork on the flat ground and the ground driving through the obstacles and it would have been a year and a half in the groundwork before I actually got on and started riding him. And I rode him for 8 years.
That is really cool.
Before he died at 27 years old.
Wow.
But yeah, it's pretty incredible. And that is in the Rock and Roll documentary that I did. It explains all about this stuff that I've told you about today and how it works and how it's really remarkable. And the sad thing is that so many people are in such a hurry to go riding, and they think you don't have to train very much just to go trail riding. But those kinds of things that we do are actually harder on our animals than if we did spend the kind of time that I'm talking about on doing this groundwork. I mean, I've got animals, I got 12 mules out there that are all over 30 years old, and still they have the oomph and the enthusiasm and the strength to go ahead and carry a rider with energy and move correctly, and there's not a bit of arthritis in any of them. You've seen how happy they are.
Oh, yeah, they're happy. They're happy campers.
Yes, they are. And they all want to go when I go out to pick somebody.
Right. Why wouldn't they? I mean,
We all have fun together because nobody's hurting.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing is that they've learned to simply freeze, and they're concerned about something rather than bolting and running. They just freeze and look at me and go, "What do we do next, Mom?"
Right.
You know. So I told the tale about how we were up trail riding in one of these interviews too, and that we were in a very dangerous situation. But in all those kinds of situations, it's better to have a mule that will stop, look at you and go, "Okay, what are we going to do now?" Rather than just taking the bridle and bolting and running and saying, "I don't want to have anything to do with this." You know, especially since I'm getting older. You know, I don't want to do any of those things that I did in the beginning. And it was funny, too, because my instructor, she had been instructing Sonny and I for 10 years, and she never got back on him in 10 years. And then we were doing the upper-level dressage one day, and she had the dressage arena set up in a small pasture. And she was trying to get me to do a shoulder in, and she goes, "No, you're not doing that just right. You know, this is a 3-track, and you got to do this just right." And I said, "Well, would you like to get on and try and show me that way again?" And she said, "Well, he's been really good for almost 10 years now, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." And she got up there, and she tried to show me the shoulder in, and he bolted, he jumped out of the arena and ran back to the gate.
Oh,
she goes, "I should have known he was going to do this with me."
What a hoot.
They keep you on your toes.
This is so amazing to hear you make it very clear about the elbow pull and about the posture, and this is really neat. It's been wonderful. You have a website.
I do. My website is at www.lucky3ranch.com, and that's spelling out 3, not the number 3. I have another website for children, jasperthemule.com. Right. I have a Facebook page at Meredith Hodges, public figure Facebook page. I actually have 2 of them. I have a friends page too, but it's maxed out at 5,000. But I put the same thing on both Facebook pages, so you won't miss anything. And if you do have questions or concerns and you've looked at the website and you can't find your answers, feel free to email me at meredith@lucky3ranch.com or call me at 800-816-7566. And if you don't get me straight up, leave a message. I answer every email, every letter, and every phone call.
All right. Meredith, you have a wonderful day, and we will talk soon.
Thank you. We will.
If you'd like to be a guest on the show or a sponsor, send me an email.
everycowgirlsdream@gmail.com.
Gotta go. My mule is looking for me.
Mule Talk is an Every Cowgirl's Dream production.